Going. We just had a meeting with Mitch McConnell and the group, and we're working on a package of very positive things. We're getting some very good numbers. It looks like the numbers are going to be very good into the future. We're going to be very strong, starting with our transition period, which will be probably June, July. I think you're going to see some very good numbers coming out. And next year is going to be an incredible economic year for this country. One of our best. Always paying respects to the people that have lost their lives. We always have to remember that. The people that have lost their lives. Do you have any questions, please?
Mr. President, where are you on funding for Michigan? A lot of people are concerned they're flooded out. They said that's the last thing they need is for a threat to come from the president.
So we're looking at the floods. We have our people from the Army Corps of Engineers there. We have FEMA there. I spoke with the governor, Governor Whitmer, yesterday, and we have a very good understanding, but we've moved our best people into Michigan and our most talented engineers, designers, the people from the Army Corps of Engineers, and they do these things better than probably anyone in the world.
What about the funding?
Well, we'll take a look. No, we'll take a look. That was unrelated to that.
Why are you telling them
Russia and us have developed very good relationship. As you know, we worked on the oil problem together. I think we have a very good relationship with Russia, but Russia didn't adhere to the treaty. So until they adhere, we will pull out. But there's a very good chance we'll make a new agreement or do something to put that agreement back together. But whenever there's an agreement that another party doesn't agree to, you know, we have many of those agreements around the world where it's a two-party agreement, but they don't adhere to it, and we do. When we have things like that, we pull out also. That's why with the arms treaties, if you look at the arms treaties, we're probably going to make a deal with Russia on arms treaty, and China will be maybe included in that. We'll see what happens. But we have a lot of things. But when we have an agreement, when we have a treaty, and the other side doesn't adhere to it, in many cases they're old treaties, old agreements, then we pull out also. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to pull out, and they're going to come back and want to make a deal. We've had a very good relationship lately with Russia, and you can see that with respect to oil and what's happening with oil.
about Michael Cohen getting out of jail today?
I didn't know that. I didn't know it. Nope, I didn't know it. Say it?
Isn't this withdrawal going to make things worse with Russia? Increase tensions?
No, I think that we're going to have a very good relationship with Russia. I think that if you look at what happened with oil, where Russia, Saudi Arabia, and us got together, and we saved in our country millions of energy jobs, and you see oil now is solidifying. So it's the best of all worlds. We're saving the energy jobs, but our drivers have a very low gasoline price.
Are you going to wear a mask today in the fourth class?
Well, I don't know. We're going to look at it. A lot of people have asked me that question. I want to get our country back to normal. I want to normalize. One of the other things I want to do is get the churches open. The churches are not being treated with respect by a lot of the Democrat governors. I want to get our churches open, and we're going to take a very strong position on that very soon. Mosques, yeah, including mosques. Yes, I wish them well, very well. Go ahead.
Talk about the AstraZeneca an award, $1 billion for 400 million doses of a potential new vaccine. How confident are you that one will be ready by the fall?
Well, I think we have a lot of, you have AstraZeneca, which is a great company, and you have others, Johnson & Johnson. We have a lot of things happening on the vaccine front, on the therapeutic front. If you look at therapeutically, we're doing great. And on the cure front, which is the next step, I think we have tremendous things. That announcement I heard came out this morning. That's a very positive announcement in addition to all of the other announcements. We are so far ahead of where people thought we'd be, but therapeutically it's very interesting what's going on in cure. So you're going to have a lot of big announcements over the next week or two.
Sir, you said the funding for Michigan was another issue now related to the flood. Can you just assure people?
Well, we're helping Michigan with their flood, and we have the people to do it.
What about the funding that you said federal funding for the mail-in voting?
We don't want them to do mail-in ballots because it's going to lead to total election fraud. So we don't want them to do mail-in ballots. We don't want anyone to do mail-in ballots. Now, if somebody has to mail it in because they're sick, or, by the way, because they live in the White House and they have to vote in Florida and they won't be in Florida, if there's a reason for it, that's okay. If there's a reason. But if there's not, we don't want to take any chances with fraud in our elections.
The Chinese parliament is poised to pass a national security law cracking down on Hong Kong. Are you aware of this?
I don't know what it is because nobody knows yet. If it happens, we'll address that issue very strongly. So it looks like G7 may be on because we've done well. We're ahead of schedule in terms of our country, and some of the other countries are doing very well. It looks like G7 will be on, a full G7, and we'll be announcing something probably early next week. I can't hear you. You have your mask on. I can't hear a word. We'll be talking to you about it.
So how long do you expect to see
I think it's another day. I had a 2-week regimen of hydroxychloroquine, and I've taken it, I think, just about 2 weeks. I think it's another day. So, and I'm still here. I'm still here. And I tested very positively in another sense. So this morning, yeah, I tested positively toward negative, right? So, no, I tested perfectly this morning. Meaning I tested negative.
Have you taken the antibody test yet?
But that's the way of saying it. Positively toward the negative.
Have you taken the antibody test yet, sir?
No, I have not.
Columbia University put out a report in the New York Times today that 36,000 people would have been saved if you guys did social distancing measures just 1 week earlier. Do you believe that? What's your reaction to that?
I was so early. I was earlier than anybody thought. I put a ban on people coming in from China. Everybody fought me on that. They didn't want it. Nancy Pelosi, a month later, was dancing in the streets of San Francisco in Chinatown so that people wouldn't believe what's happening. And I don't even blame that. But I was way early. Columbia is an institution that's very liberal. I think it's just a political hit job. You want to know the truth?
You want to have the G7 here at the White House or Camp David?
We're going to have it probably at the White House and maybe a little combination at Camp David, but primarily at the White House. So if we do the G7, when that all comes together, probably it will be in D.C. at the White House. Okay? But there could be a piece of it at Camp David, which is nearby. Yeah. So again, our relationship with Russia has improved greatly, especially since the Russian hoax has been proven totally false and illegal, what they did. This was an illegal hoax, and they got caught. They got caught doing a lot of bad things. So let's see how that turns out. But our relationship with Russia's come a long way in the last few months. I think that the open sky will all work out. But right now, when you have an agreement and the other side doesn't adhere to the agreement, we're not going to adhere to it either. But I think something very positive will work out. What? I'm thinking about going. That'll be next week. To the rocket launch. I hope you're all going to join me. I'd like to put you on the rocket and get rid of you for a while. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve.
Sir, you've asked to see the original 302.
You've been listening to President Trump on his way to visit a Ford plant in Michigan, where they're demanding that he wear a mask. And his response there to whether he will, he said he's not sure, but he wants to, quote, normalize the country. Then he pivoted to opening churches. He says he's almost finished with 2 weeks of the unproven drug hydroxychloroquine, which most health experts warn against as a preventative measure for coronavirus. It is still in clinical testing for that. His comments also come as a model shows that nearly 40,000 American lives could have been saved had the U.S. acted a week earlier. John King is with me now. John, let's start here with the mask situation, because he has just refused over and over to wear masks. And it seems like the folks around him have started picking up that process. He also seems really frustrated to talk to people with masks. So you just heard him do something there that he's done to reporters a number of times when they're asking a question. He says, "I can't understand you because you're wearing a mask." What do you make of this?
This is just a tough riddle to solve, Brianna, in the sense that the president is trying to project.
We were very, very low. You look at the death, relatively speaking, we're at the lowest level along with Germany. I'd like to ask you maybe about that, if I could, Deborah. We've done, amazing well. I think the biggest thing we did is stopping the inflow from China.
Joining us now, NBC's Carol Lee from the White House. And Carol, it is really Earth 1, Earth 2, and this White House has decided they are going to spin a tale that is much different than the facts you see on the ground.
Yeah, Chuck, the one message from President Trump that has been consistent throughout this crisis is, "I did a good job." And you're not going to see him deviate from that message. If anything, he's going to be hitting it harder as he campaigns for re-election. And when he just said a few minutes ago was not only that this Columbia University study was politicized, but also that he did a great job. He was earlier than anybody else was in responding to this pandemic. And a White House official responded to the Columbia University study by blaming China and the World Health Organization. That's another thing that we've been seeing. And Chuck, Vice President Mike Pence was on Fox Business Network this morning, and here's how he responded to a question about this.
Because of the leadership that President Trump provided, starting in January when he suspended all travel from China, when he stood up the White House Coronavirus Task Force, began screening passengers from China, and then, as you know, Stuart, we eventually closed down travel from Europe, screened passengers from Italy and South Korea. We bought an extraordinarily important amount of time.
So you see, that's the message from this White House, that the president's response was fine. That's what it's going to be. I wouldn't expect any of that to change. This is not a White House that's ready to do a retrospective on what the president could have done better or what he could have done differently for now and for the remainder of this crisis and throughout the campaign. It's going to be that he did a great job. But as you mentioned, there's a very different story to be told.
Well, about the only thing they admit is that the CDC messed up, as we've learned. That is the one thing they are willing to concede. But it's almost as if they want to create almost as if they're a separate entity from the administration. Carol Lee getting us started. Thank you. Katie, over to you.
Thanks, Chuck.
And Chuck, we got a question about what the CDC is doing right now. That's coming up later in the show. But while the president is heading to the battleground state of Michigan, a new national poll shows he's trailing rival Joe Biden in the 2020 election. The Quinnipiac poll shows the former vice president leading President Trump by 11 points, 50 to 39%. Joining us now is MSNBC national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, with the caveat that it'll be battleground states that end up deciding this election, first tell us about this national poll.
Yeah, so obviously that's the biggest margin you've seen for Biden in a recent national poll. If you take all the recent
coronavirus, it's either a yes or a no, right? He seemed to be saying he's testing very well, which is that he tested negative, but it's not to show that, it seems like he's paving the way to say, I took hydroxychloroquine
recently. I can tell you anecdotally from what my brother says at Brooklyn Hospital, but I can tell you just numbers-wise, they're there. Governor Cuomo has said it. Ned Lamont, who's neighbor in Connecticut, has said it. New Jersey governor has said it. So what does that mean for reopening Manhattan, which is the financial center of the world? I'm getting this from executives at the big banks. There is nothing written in stone, but the general consensus, and they are meeting together, by the way, they are dealing with this in somewhat unison. General consensus is that they can start bringing back more people, sooner rather than later. Later was late in the summer. Sooner right now means, and again, it's a moving target. It's unofficial. It's the June, July timeframe where people can start coming back to offices. Now, will this be the whole enchilada? I mean, all their people? No, they're going to filter them back in. It's, you can basically, office culture will be a lot different, particularly Manhattan going forward. There'll be less people in elevators. So you just can't bring all the people back in. But they are gearing up for some sort of open, at least as of now. And again, it could change when the data changes. But for filtering people back in mid-June, July. And a lot of this is related to the fact that, you can't have everybody working from home. Some people can. Brokers, financial advisors do very well at home. Others, traders, not so much. So people can come back. They're eyeing that June, July period as for more what's known as essential workers coming back in. Now, a lot of people say, I've done some reporting on this, and people say, well,
of making a decision of who is best qualified to lead us out of this crisis and rebuild the economy is someone who's proven they can do it. And that's Donald Trump. Joe Biden has not proven that he can lead us out of a crisis. I'm not sure he could lead us out of his own house, much less lead the country in a time where we need it most. We've seen Donald Trump deliver that. And I think that when it comes November, we're going to see people push and move to that level of confidence because we know he could get the job done.
Well, you can see from that one poll, voters are split on that idea of who can take us forward. One of the things, though, that will help all of us is if we decide we want to help businesses in our communities. Sarah, I know you and your husband have done just that. You've launched a nonprofit to help Arkansas small business owners struggling during the pandemic. Quickly tell me about that and the kind of success that you'll measure it by.
Absolutely. We saw friends of ours that had started something in Virginia, and it was doing extremely well of basically Virginians stepping up and helping others in their community. We decided to replicate that program here in Arkansas. We launched on Monday. We've had a tremendous amount of support. This is not a government program. It is quick, easy, and free of red tape. And this is all about Arkansans stepping up and helping Arkansans. We're raising money from the private sector and putting it back into the pockets of small business owners. People can go to Arkansas 30-Day Fund to sign up, to apply, and also to donate. And it's really just about people coming together as a community, uniting about what brings us together and making sure we're taking care of those that we can. And it's just been a remarkable experience and something that we're proud to get to play a little role in here in our home state.
Well, great work getting that done. I know people appreciate it. Small businesses are taking such a punch. And I caught what you said, separating it out from government. And how can you tell? Because it's quick, easy, and free of red tape. I wrote that part down.
Absolutely.
Sarah Sanders, thanks so much for doing the program today.
Great. Thank you, Harris.
New reaction now from former Vice President Joe Biden and his campaign, as a Senate panel has issued.
Here's the restart in New York.
Trend, which I'll address in just one moment. We took samples, the map, from every Monday for the past 7 Mondays. Look at what happens. You see the darker colors mean those states have had an increase in new cases. Tan means they're sort of holding steady. Obviously, if you move down to green, it's getting better. And look, it moves all over the place over those 7 Mondays. Sometimes a state is up, the next time it's down. Sometimes it's steady, on it goes. Can you see a clear trend there? It's hard to see one. We did the same thing over the past 14 days to see if maybe that would show us clear waves of where it's getting better or where it's getting worse. If you look at that sequence, you can see the same thing. Some states moving up, some states moving down. New Jersey, for example, recently had a move down, but New Jersey has had some of the most cases in the country. You might statistically expect them to move down because they would seemingly be closer to a peak, whereas states like South Dakota and Arkansas moving up. Well, they're more rural places where maybe they haven't had so much. Really, Brianna, when you look at all of this, what it probably tells you more than anything else is that this testing protocol that we have in the country is still incredibly uneven. What's being measured, who's being measured, where, how it's been reported, and that makes it hard to make sense out of this in a way that really justifies reopening or keeping everything closed. But this last one, when you ask about trends, take a look at this last map. This is really the one that probably matters more than anything else. The overall number of confirmed cases in the country as of today. Look, anything on this map that is even vaguely orange or red or pink, all of those places have at least 5,000 cases, and in some cases more than 75,000 cases. The number one trend that we are certain of in this country is that the number of cases continues to grow and the number of deaths continue to grow, suggesting that we really don't have any kind of handle on this virus yet, even as we're making some progress in some places. Brianna?
Thank you so much for that 30,000-foot look, Tom. Appreciate it. And as scientists are racing to develop a coronavirus vaccine, the U.S. has just entered a $1 billion agreement with the pharmaceutical giant AstraZeneca to secure more than 300 million doses of a potential vaccine. That's about 1/3 of the initial doses the company is planning to initially produce worldwide. CNN senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen is joining us now. What more do we know about this, Elizabeth?
Well, Brianna, I want to sort of, speaking of taking a 30,000-foot view like you just did with Tom, let's do that with vaccines as well. It is extremely unusual. I don't think this has ever been done, where we make a vaccine and huge amounts of it at the same time that we're testing it to see if it actually works. Because this vaccine, which was developed at the University of Oxford in England and is being made by AstraZeneca, we don't know if it works. We don't know if any of them works. But what was decided by public health officials is, look, if we do trials over the next few months and we find, one or two or three or whatever that work, and then we start production, we are going to be way behind. We want to be able to start giving it to people as soon as we realize that it works. So it's a gamble. You're rolling the dice. It is possible, as a matter of fact, it's quite probable, that we're going to spend a lot of money on many, many doses of vaccine that then will turn out not to work. But it also means that we will spend a lot of money and it will work, and then we will have a vaccine ready. And the decision has been that it is basically okay to waste a certain proportion of this money in order to have a vaccine quickly. So AstraZeneca is one of the places that's doing this, making many doses, while at the same time they're trying to figure out if their vaccine works and if it is safe. Brianna?
Elizabeth Cohen, thank you. And as the president gets ready to visit a Ford plant soon, the automaker halting production at another plant after employees there test positive. I'll be speaking with a plant worker from that factory. Plus, experts say most children don't get hit hard by the virus, and a new study may show just why that is. Also, the wife of Broadway actor Nick Cordero, who's been suffering complications from coronavirus for months now, says he suffered another setback.
Things are going a little downhill at the moment, so I am asking again for all the prayers, mega prayers.
Mega prayers.
They line up by the thousands, each one suffering with a story that breaks your heart. Like 10-year-old Zakael. He has a growing tumor on his neck. He needs surgery.
Broadway actor Nick Cordero.
I'd like to weigh in on a couple things real quick. President is really stretching it kind of thin towards getting out on a limb, pretending to taking that type of medication that he really don't know for sure what the end results of it is. Of course, he's the president. He's got a right to put in his body whatever he chooses to put in his body. Secret Service can only go so far pertaining to protecting him. And a lot of times we're our worst enemy. Most of the time we are. Towards doing stuff to ourselves that we shouldn't do. Hopefully that won't be the case with Donald Trump, and hopefully he's made the right decision in the medication that he's taking, and also hopefully he'll make the right decision towards putting on a mask whenever he goes into an area that he knows is contaminated. Also, I want to weigh in about a severe problem that a lot of people don't even know that has occurred pertaining to two dams breaking up in Michigan because of the flooding. It has caused substantial flooding in one particular town, and I don't forgot now how many houses that has flooded, but it's just an astronomical amount that's going to add that much more of a price tag to our crisis national deficit. Once more, this is all related around global crisis with our environment towards global warming, that as far as I know the president is still in denial of. Whenever we have excess weather like this, that is this abnormal, I believe that out of that system they was predicting as much as 10, maybe possibly more inches of rain coming up through South Carolina, North Carolina, of a system that is created down somewhere around Florida just within the past few days, that has moved up into that area that has caused so much havoc. Whenever we see these type of patterns again and again and again and again, regardless whether it's too much rain or not enough rain, too much heat or not enough, whenever we see these extremes back and forth like we have been steadily seeing the patterns in the past few years intensify, we have to scratch our heads and wonder, what is the core of origin that is causing this? It is because of global warming. The system has begun to heal itself to some degree because of the pandemic of people slowing down in their driving habits, and also with the aviation airline industry. But to get it back to normal would probably take years before we would see a substantial release of carbon dioxide poisons and seeing the difference between what it is now considered 30 plus years ago, what was considered normal. We have to take these signs, and that's exactly what the Bible talks about. It talks about signs, and you have to be able to read the signs. You have to be able to identify the signs in understanding that these are all the beginnings of the sorrows that are going to be happening here upon to the world of the end of time, pertaining to the sin of humanity, the sin of society. You have to be able to recognize these signs, regardless whether it's weather pattern signs, regardless whether it's the dying off of the bees, regardless whether it's a pandemic, regardless whether it's unfortunate refugees, 3+ million people that's starving right now over in various parts of the world. You have to be able to open your eyes to understand how come these things are continually happening on the rate that they're happening in. And of course the bottom line is sin. Sin. Sin and sorrows has befallen upon to this nation, to the point that now we are basically in the day of judgment. Please do not take these things lightly. And it grieves my heart. We need to keep the people in prayer up in Michigan, those who have went through substantial flooding, just like down in Texas, down towards Houston, down towards Galveston, and other parts of the country throughout the years that have went through such horrible, horrible flooding events pertaining to these massive cells that continue to keep building again and again and again, that are dumping these massive amounts of rain that ordinarily never took place but about once every 100 years, or once every 50 years, or once every 20 years, that now are concurrent towards them happening every year. We're going to have to understand the fine-tuning of this world if we're going to live a productive, civilized way to society. And even Jesus preached on the weather patterns of how that they would be signs of sorrows, to flee into the mountains, to go into the higher elevation areas, to get away from such harsh conditions, as well as get away from the big city life towards going into areas that are more isolated with solitude. We must continue to keep praying for the victims of the COVID-19. We must continue to keep praying for our men and women in uniform coming up on Memorial this weekend. We must continue to keep praying for the victims of those who are prey in major catastrophes pertaining to weather events, and pray for each other, uplift each other, build each other. Use this time to, I hate to use the word brownie points, but use this time in your life to basically score brownie points in your rewards of what that you're going to be receiving one day whenever you eventually leave this world and go into the world hereafter. Please, please take these signs serious, just as this woman right here is begging for prayer in a very, very unique way. We're going to end on listening to her one more time as she makes this plea to the world on national TV. Good luck to my viewers, and shalom.
Things are going a little downhill at the moment, so I am asking again for all the prayers, mega prayers.
Mega prayers. God bless her soul. Shalom.